Hi guys, welcome to Manifest Track TV, a platform that amplifies citizen voices and assess the performance of the Nigerian government on its campaign promises in the areas of health, education, job creation, social investment and infrastructure. My name is Aisha Buba. And today we are going to be examining President Muhammadu Buhari's campaign promise on job creation. To discuss this, I have here with me a development governance expert in the person of Mr. Chambers Umezulike. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. My pleasure.
So to go straight to the point, what is your opinion on campaign promises in Nigeria?
Campaign promises in Nigeria, I think to a very, very large extent, they're just vague, kind of vague promises, in the sense that the electoral process in the country, we've actually reversed it. So politicians during electoral cycles, instead of delivering their policies, their manifestos, how they're going to improve welfare and the likes, they rather aggregate resources from several platforms and, distribute what I could call malcontents of stomach infrastructure. So that has been the trend for some time now, because politicians know that when the electoral window reaches, all they just have to do is to share several materials, food items and the likes, and voters vote for them. So to a very, very large extent, I don't think campaign promises have been effective the way they should be in the country.
Okay. So is it also a case of the citizens allowing them to get away with it?
Yeah, Nigeria's problem is actually multidimensional in the sense that, we have a leadership problem, we also have a followership problem. So if you see a politician or a lawmaker, the constituents, they expect the person to give them some of all these handouts. So if you're a senator and you're telling them that you've made so and so number of laws at the legislature, they wouldn't regard those things as impactful. They're looking for those stomach infrastructural, benefits that they could lay their hands on, as fast as possible.
Yeah, with the bills when they can't immediately see the physical
the effects of that. Some of these, there's a saying by the founding father of Singapore that you can't have a functional democracy in a country whereby there is, preponderant poverty, where institutions are not effective, so that's actually what we're having in the country, whereby poverty has eaten so deep into the society, and citizens that are just looking for those hangouts, bags of rice and all that. So they don't regard some of those policy level and reform oriented campaign promises as something they should, hold on.
So with your experience in international development, what major impacts do you think job creation can have on economic growth and development?
Job creation is very, very important. It's actually one of the most effective ways. Number one, is actually one of the most effective ways to address poverty. One of the most sustainable means, because when people are employed, they earn incomes. So with those incomes, they could be able to feed themselves, provide shelter, clothing, access healthcare, access, schools and the likes, and take care of their dependents. Then secondly, in terms of political stability, without political stability, you can't have economic growth and development, and job creation pulls people out of the streets with respect to crimes and other fashions of criminality. Like in the country, we currently have insurgency, we have militancy, we have kidnapping, armed robbery, and the likes. When there is job, when, the youthful population are properly engaged, they don't get into the midst of some of all the... There have been several literature and researches that actually suggest that poverty is one of the most important drivers of political crisis in every country. So when there are jobs, you can be able to address some of all those socioeconomic consequences. Then thirdly, in terms of stimulating the economy, in the sense that when people are employed, they have resources to spend. It increases the consumer spending. It creates demand, for several, and businesses that can meet those demands, they make money and even employ people to render those services that those that are already employed and having, that kind. So it kind of stimulates the economy, as a whole. So in terms of stimulating the economy, ensuring political stability, and being one of the most effective means of addressing poverty, job creation is very, very important to economic growth and development.
It sounds like a really good give and take kind of.
Exactly. They both influence each other. When you have economic growth and development, it has an impact on job creation. And when people are employed, it also has an impact on economic growth and development.
Interesting. So, with the current administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, there is a document that has promised to engage 1 million youth through the Empower, 7.5 million jobs in agriculture, and 500,000 in technology. Right? So, what do you think the promises are achievable? Are they feasible?
There is a general saying that statistics, they don't lie. So when this government got into power, unemployment rate was at around 9% as at 2015. As at last year, 2019, it was already at 23%. And there's a projection that it will get to 33% in this present year. So looking at that kind of statistics, you just know that some of their schemes have not been as effective as they should be. Taking them one after the other. Empower. What is empower? There is a general economic principle that you create wealth before you distribute wealth. I can actually refer to empower as some of the political class that are preoccupied with oil rents, sharing oil rents. That's what the country is all about. So those sharing mechanisms like Empower is actually one of them. Empower has not been effective. It's not even sustainable. You have several ghost workers on the scheme. You have several young people that are on the scheme that do not want to render any services. So all those issues are there. Even I was expecting the administration, as of 2019, when they got back to power, to do an evaluation and assessment of the scheme to know how it's been able to impact on the economy, stimulate the economy. If those, some of those young guys that have been deployed to schools to teach and the likes, if there are any effects in terms of learning outcomes and the likes, nothing like that was done. I just think that it's just a shortcut to addressing the unemployment problem, and they're also not doing that effectively. Taking agriculture, for instance, I know there are some efforts there and there, but we can't keep romanticizing agriculture.
So what do you
agriculture has never developed. There is no developed society that got developed through agriculture. What countries actually do is that you transfer resources from those low productivity sectors, such as agriculture, to high productivity ones, such as industries. So looking at a lot of work still has to be done. We have to make agriculture appealing, to young people. They should look at it as a scheme through which they can be able to prosper. Then you look at connecting farmers to markets. When you go to the north, if you take a road trip to Kano, for instance, you see several tomatoes everywhere. Most of them rot away because the infrastructure to move them to where, so connecting farmers to markets, giving them improved seedlings, mechanizing the entire process. Subsistence farming doesn't develop any country. Then looking at the value addition part of it, we should be able to have industries and a thriving manufacturing sector that get these raw materials and agricultural outputs from the farmers and transfer and add value to them. That's how countries prosper. So in terms of agriculture, they still have a lot of work to do. Then for technology, I don't actually know what that means because it's actually very, very vague. They weren't so when you look at some of these schemes of the present government with respect to addressing the unemployment crisis, personally, I think that they're ineffective. There's a projection that by 2050, we're going to have 400 million Nigerians. Unemployment as at this year is going to be at 33%. So just imagine what will be. So is going to be a cataclysm in the sense of a total disaster, a waiting time bomb. And look at what is happening to the global energy dynamics in terms of oil prices. If there is no coherent a multi-dimensional effort with respect to getting this country industrialized. Just imagine what will happen in 2050. So the government has to get to work.
It's not enough to just pick some few sectors and focus.
It's not enough. 7.5 million Nigerians engaged in agriculture, 1 million as empowered. It was 500,000 before. Now it's 1 million. I don't really understand, how they think that some of all these, like Empower scheme, could be very, very effective.
And in your opinion, for example, with the Empower, if there is nothing like they graduate to something better.
Yeah. So what's the result of that? If when this administration die in the first year of their second term, so when they complete the next 4 years, what will be the future of Empower?
Okay. So an analysis of the Nigeria 2020 budget has revealed that a 23% allocation for capital expenditure has been done. So what implication does this have on the fulfillment of the campaign promise of job creation?
23% for capital expenditure, I think that's still very, very nanoscopic. To be very, very sincere with you, that means you are now spending 77% on record. The budget is just a tool for sharing oil rents, for servicing, our recurrent list. Capital expenditure should get to around 40% before there could be some kind of, and mind you, since around 2016, the government has not been able to release up to 50% of what they budgeted for capital expenditure. Getting back to what I said initially, the problem is just over dependence on oil. So when oil prices go south, the entire country macroeconomically will be in crisis. That's what the government doesn't even have sufficient revenues. Looking at this particular budget you just referred to, around 23% of it is for servicing debt. Around 20% of it is budget deficit. That means the government must have to borrow the funds and the likes. And Nigeria is actually a poor country. We need to, leave our comfort zone and be realistic with our present circumstances. Nigeria is a poor country. The budget of around 8 trillion naira is just around 20-something billion dollars. That's less than a budget of a state in the United States. When you look at the budget per capita, every Nigerian goes home with less than $100. That means, when you look at it from that perspective, what every Nigerian will benefit from the budget is less than $100 within a year.
Wow.
So even the budget on its own is still very, very small. But at the same time, the government doesn't have the revenues and oil prices are nosediving. So just like I mentioned before, industrialization is mandatory for Nigeria. Nigeria has to structurally transform. When the government mentions infrastructure, that building a railway from Lagos to Maiduguri, what's the railway for? From Lagos to Maiduguri, is it an economic corridor? We should be thinking in that light, because the government doesn't have the sufficient resources to provide infrastructure across the country. So you should be able to prioritize infrastructure provision. It should be at the, having economic clusters, economic corridors, where if you provide infrastructure with the resources that you do not even have, it's going to result into some kind of quick gains. Look at the Kaduna Abuja railway. They've not even been able to pay back the loan, and they're subsidizing it. These are some kind of shocking paradoxes. You are subsidizing it for who? For the rich, actually, because if I want to take that train, I have to get to Idu or Kubwa. That means I have to use a taxi, which is around maybe 2,000, 2,500. When I reach Kaduna, I will stop at Rigasa, use taxi again to get into town. So when you put this together, I might end up spending around 6,000 for that trip. The poor can't afford it, because the same train fare of 1,300 or 1,500, that's the same thing they pay using the road. So we should be strategic in the way we, spend resources, so that we can be able to get, actual results. Looking at entrepreneurship, for instance, what the government just have to do is to go to Tony Elumelu and borrow his footprint and replicate across the country, subnationalize that model. That's one of the most effective ways to spur young people to innovate, to be creative, to start up businesses and employ people.
And what about that scheme do you think would make it very effective for Nigerians, for the government to replicate? What is it exactly about the Tony?
Yeah, he's been able to empower thousands of young people across the continent to be business owners. He provides them with with grants around $5,000, and I think when they perform well, they give them another $5,000 as a loan. Those are the kind of schemes. But in Nigeria, again, those kind of schemes can't work effectively, without them injecting political patronage and some of all those malcontents.
And how about the individuals getting the funds and this money?
There should be a proper monitoring and evaluation process to follow up with these funds. Look at UWIN, for instance. There are several young people that got that UWIN fund and they didn't use it for anything. Some traveled with it, some married with it, some did all manner of stuff with it, because you don't have those processes, are not in place to keep monitoring them. There must be a process. They have bank details, they have international passport, national identity card, and some of all those. There must be a way to synchronize all this, so that if you took money from the government and you didn't do what you were supposed to do with it, there must be a way that you are going to be that kind of stuff. But entrepreneurship also, they should be looking at venture capital.
Okay.
We should have a robust venture capital scheme in the country whereby young people have access to such. That would actually help to spur businesses in terms of growth. The government should also remove some of all those micro barriers to firm functioning, in the sense, if you want to register a company now, it might end up taking you days. What the country should just do is to map out areas and create special economic zones and industrial estates. These are some of the models that East Asia used to prosper. When you have social economic zones and industrial estates, you now selectively remove those firm constraints. You make sure there is power. You make sure there is infrastructure. You make sure there is nothing like corruption around there. You make sure that people can easily, open their businesses, register their businesses, perform optimally. You make sure, provide tax incentives, export promotion schemes. That's how you can be able to attract investors. So you are not addressing the infrastructural deficits across the country as a whole at the same time. You're just doing it at selected locations. And when you've done that successfully, you start an aggressive drive for foreign investors. Low-end industries in East Asia, they are getting less and less competitive because of rise in labor and land costs. So Nigeria should target those industries to attract them into the country. That's and they're going to have a multiplier effect on the economy. Industrial estates doesn't mean that you are just going to see, several big machines and all that. They could have shopping malls, they can have recreational centers, they could have restaurants, they're going to have residential areas. All these are going to stimulate the economy as a whole.
So it sounds like that there could be a link between managing corruption and job creation.
Is there a link? There have been several efforts to, mix up some of these. When there is no electricity, it's because of corruption. When, something happens, corruption is everywhere. In short, economic development literature, when you go through some of all these researches, when Indonesia was developing under the Suharto government, Indonesia was competing with Nigeria on corruption neck to neck. I don't think the fundamental problem is corruption.
Okay.
The fundamental problem is lack of a direction. Nigeria doesn't have direction. So sorry, I have to say, there's no. And in terms of fighting corruption, are they even effective with it? If you want to fight corruption, number one is through technology. You digitize every avenue of revenue remittances, in the sense that, in terms of, if I want to get an international passport, I don't have to go to the passport office for anything. I do every single thing online and get it online. That way, you reduce some of all those. It's fiscal contacts that breed, corruption. Look at Kenya, for instance. Their e-visa is online. So if you are going to Kenya, for instance, when you reach the airport in Nairobi, you don't have any discussion with customs people. They just have to check your e-visa and allow you to go.
So lastly, what is your advice for Nigerians on how to hold their leaders accountable on their campaign promises?
hold the leaders accountable to their campaign promises.
They made the promise, so they have to deliver. How do
There's what they call a functional social contract, in the sense that, you vote people into office, you hold them to account, you pay taxes, you provide oversight over how the government is implementing the taxes. But we can't keep going this way, in the sense that I've been part of some of all these schemes, citizens tracking budgets, citizens doing these, journalists, media tracking budgets and all that. Despite the fact that that's not their ideal job, but based on our own context, I think is simply to just provide oversight over what the government is doing. Those campaign promises, those manifestos, the only way they could be operationalized is through the budget. So providing oversight, knowing what the government is doing, asking questions, being active citizens. If your state government, if the governor has signed the budget into law, you make an effort, you can write an FOI request, make an effort to have get access to that particular budget document, examine it and look at things you can start following up on. For Nigeria to ensure political stability, economic growth, prosperity, and development, we must have to structurally transform. We must have to industrialize.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. It's been a really impactful and insightful conversation. Yeah, we look forward to having you sometime again.
Yeah, it's fine.